I was staring at my phone when the notification came through. My mother, after 3 years of absolute silence, had sent me a text. Not a congratulations, not a how are you doing. Just 5 words that made my blood run cold. Your father had a stroke, please. I looked at that message for exactly 10 seconds. Then I handed my phone to Marcus, my husband, who was walking beside me on the beach. He glanced at it, looked at me, and without a word, powered it off and slipped it into his pocket. The Pacific Ocean stretched out before us, endless and free. I took a deep breath of salt air and smiled. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly free. But before I tell you why I felt nothing when I read those words, before I explain why my husband turned off my phone without hesitation, I need you to understand something. This isn't a story about being cruel. This is a story about survival. About the moment you realize that blood doesn't make family and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. If you've ever been the forgotten one, the overlooked one, the one who was expected to understand while everyone else got to live their dreams, then stay with me. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to choose between your peace and your family's demands. Because trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. Let me take you back to where it all started. 3 years and 4 months before that text on the beach. To the worst day of my life. It was supposed to be the happiest day. I remember standing in the bridal suite at the winery in Napa Valley looking at myself in the mirror. The dress was perfect. French lace-fitted bodice, a train that seemed to float behind me like a cloud. My hair was pinned up in soft waves, tiny white roses tucked into the curls. I looked like every bride dreams of looking, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My maid of honor, Claire, noticed. She came up behind me and squeezed my shoulders. Aria, honey, you look absolutely stunning. Marcus is going to lose his mind when he sees you. I managed a smile, but it felt brittle. My eyes kept darting to my phone on the vanity. No messages. No calls. Nothing. They're probably just running late, Claire said, softly reading my mind like she always did. We'd been best friends since college, and she knew everything. She knew about the years of being second best. About how every achievement I'd ever had was met with a polite nod before the conversation turned to my brother Caleb. About how my parents had mortgaged their house to invest in his third failed startup while I'd worked 2 jobs to put myself through grad school. But this was different. This was my wedding day. Surely they wouldn't miss this. The wedding planner knocked on the door. 5 minutes, Miss Vance. The guests are all seated. All seated. The words echoed in my head. I picked up my phone one more time. Still nothing. My thumb hovered over my mother's contact, but I couldn't bring myself to call. I already knew what I'd hear in her voice. That slight tone of impatience, like I was being unreasonable for wanting them there. I walked down that hallway like I was walking to my execution. The outdoor venue was breathtaking. String lights were draped between the oak trees, and the late afternoon sun cast everything in gold. Rows of white chairs filled with 90 guests who had traveled from all over the country to celebrate with us. And at the end of the aisle stood Marcus, tall and solid in his charcoal suit, his face lighting up the moment he saw me. The music started. Pachelbel's Canon. I took my first step out, and that's when I saw them. Or rather, didn't see them, the front row on the bride's side. 3 chairs marked with white ribbons that said reserved for family of the bride. 3 empty chairs. I heard the whispers start immediately. People craning their necks confused. Marcus's family in the front row on his side, their faces a mixture of pity and anger. My parents weren't just absent. They'd made sure everyone would notice. I stopped walking. For just a second, I considered turning around and running. But then I saw Marcus. He was staring at me with so much love, so much certainty that something inside me shifted. I lifted my chin, straightened my spine, and walked toward him like a queen. Every step was deliberate. Every step was a choice. I chose him. I chose myself. I chose to move forward despite the gaping hole where my family should have been. When I reached him, Marcus took both my hands and leaned in close. "You're the strongest person I know," he whispered just for me. "And you look absolutely breathtaking." I made it through the ceremony on autopilot. I said the words, exchanged the rings, smiled for the camera. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. I was remembering every instance I'd been told to be patient with Caleb. Every time my accomplishments had been minimized. Every family dinner where I'd sat quietly while they discussed his latest business venture, with enthusiasm they'd never shown for anything I'd done. The reception was beautiful. People danced and laughed and celebrated. Marcus never left my side, sensing that I needed his steadiness. It was during our first dance that my phone vibrated in the small clutch I'd tucked under the head table. I shouldn't have looked. I should have waited, but something compelled me to check. It was from my mother. Finally. A message on my wedding day. "Sorry, honey. Caleb just closed a major deal. The whole family had to be here to celebrate. I'm sure you understand." I read it 3 times. No congratulations, no apology. Not even a single word of acknowledgement that today was my wedding day. Just the assumption that I'd understand why Caleb's business deal trumped my once-in-a-lifetime moment. Marcus saw my face change. "What is it?" I showed him the message. I watched his jaw clench, saw the muscle in his temple twitch. Marcus was usually the most even-tempered person I knew, but in that moment I saw pure rage flash across his face. "Arya, I'm so sorry." "Don't be." My voice came out flat like I was reading lines from a script. I watched my hand set down the phone with eerie calm as if it belonged to someone else. This is who they are. Who they've always been. I looked up at Marcus and something in my chest that had been straining for years finally snapped. I just kept thinking that one day, maybe at my wedding, I'd finally be enough. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. I stood in front of the mirror in my wedding dress mascara, threatening to run, and I made myself a promise. Right there, with the sound of celebration filtering through the door, I whispered to my reflection, "Never again. They chose him. So from this day forward, they don't exist to me either." I fixed my makeup, returned to the reception, and danced until my feet ached. I laughed with our friends, cut the cake, tossed the bouquet, and I didn't shed a single tear for the 3 empty chairs. Not that night, and not in all the months that followed. After the wedding, Marcus and I moved to Palo Alto. He'd been offered a position at a prestigious law firm, and I had plans of my own. Big plans. Plans that had nothing to do with winning my family's approval and everything to do with proving something to myself. I'd been working on an idea for years, even through grad school. Artificial intelligence that could genuinely understand human emotional context, not just process words. It sounds simple now, but back then, most AI was still clunky and literal. I wanted to build something that could read between the lines, understand nuance, help businesses communicate better with their customers. I started small. Really small. Our garage in Palo Alto became my office. Marcus would leave for work at 7, and I'd be at my laptop by 7:15, still in my pajamas running code until my eyes burned. We lived off his salary while I poured every dollar I could spare into my startup. The rejection letters started coming almost immediately. Venture capitalists who couldn't see the vision, angel investors who thought the market was too crowded, tech executives who told me often with barely concealed condescension that I was too inexperienced, too optimistic, too female. That last part was never said out loud, but I heard it anyway. I'd walk into pitch meetings and watch eyes glaze over the moment I started talking about the technical aspects. They'd interrupt with basic questions, things they'd never ask a male founder. They'd look at my background, see that I didn't go to Stanford or MIT, didn't have a famous advisor, didn't have family money backing me, and they'd write me off before I'd finished my pitch. There were nights I cried into Marcus's shoulder, convinced I was delusional. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I should just get a regular job, play it safe, stop reaching for something so far beyond my grasp. But Marcus never wavered. "Arya, I've seen your demos. I've watched you explain this technology to people who actually understand it, and they're blown away. You're not the problem here. The system is." 6 months in, broke and exhausted, I almost gave up. That's when I met Eleanor Vance. I'd submitted my pitch to a Women in Tech networking event, not expecting much. Eleanor was the keynote speaker, a legendary figure in Silicon Valley, who'd built and sold 2 companies before she was 40. After her speech, she hosted a small session where a few founders could present their ideas. I was the last one. My laptop's battery was dying, I hadn't slept properly in days, and I was running on coffee and desperation. But when I started talking about Insight AI, something happened. Eleanor leaned forward. She started asking questions, real questions, technical questions that proved she actually understood what I was building. After the session, she pulled me aside. "That was the most interesting pitch I've heard in 2 years, she said. "But your presentation was a mess. You're so worried about being taken seriously that you're hiding the most exciting parts of your technology behind jargon. Want to know a secret? The best founders are storytellers, first technologists second." She became my mentor. Every week we'd meet at a coffee shop in Palo Alto, and she'd tear apart my pitch, my business model, my go-to-market strategy. It was brutal and exhausting, and exactly what I needed. You need to stop making yourself smaller, she told me one day about a year into our mentorship. You apologize before you even start talking. You hedge your predictions. You act like you're lucky to be in the room. Arya, you built something remarkable. Own it. It took another 8 months, but finally something clicked. I pitched to a small fund that specialized in AI startups. The partner who met with me was a woman in her 50s who'd coded for NASA in the 80s. She got it immediately. How much are you raising? She asked. 2 million, I said, my voice steady for the first time in years. I'll give you 3, but only if you commit to aggressive growth. I don't invest in people who play small. I signed the term sheet 2 weeks later. With that money, I hired a team, real engineers, not just contractors. We moved out of the garage and into a shared workspace in Palo Alto. I worked 18-hour days, but they were different now. Before, I'd been working out of desperation. Now I was working towards something. The product took another year to build. We launched with 6 pilot customers, mid-sized companies that were willing to take a chance on unknown technology. Within 3 months, they were all reporting double-digit improvements in customer satisfaction scores. Within 6 months, we had a waiting list. That's when the big players started circling. Synapse, a tech giant that dominated the enterprise software space, reached out. They wanted a meeting, then another meeting. Then they flew me to their headquarters in Seattle. The offer when it came was staggering. $150 million. Not for a partnership, for acquisition. They wanted to buy Insight AI outright, folded into their product suite, and they wanted me to stay on as Chief Innovation Officer for 3 years. I was in Eleanor's office when I got the final offer. I must have read the email 10 times, convinced I was misreading the numbers. Take it, Eleanor said immediately. Arya, this is a unicorn exit for a first-time founder. Some people spend their whole lives trying to get here. But I'm giving up my company. No, you're giving up control of the code. But you're buying something much more valuable. You're buying the freedom to never have to prove yourself again. And you're buying a seat at a table where you can build your next thing. I negotiated for 2 more weeks because Eleanor taught me that even when you want to say yes, you negotiate. I got them up to 152 million plus stock options, plus a guarantee that my entire team would be offered positions. The day I signed the contract, Eleanor took me out for champagne at an expensive restaurant overlooking the bay. To Arya Thorne, she said, raising her glass, who was told no 100 times and only needed one yes. I posted a single photo on LinkedIn that night, me at the signing table, pen in hand, the Synapse logo behind me. The caption was simple: building my own legacy. I didn't post pictures of the money. I didn't brag about the terms. I just wanted a record that I'd done it. That the girl whose family couldn't be bothered to show up to her wedding had built something worth 9 figures. The Forbes article came out 2 weeks later. Rising Stars in AI, how Arya Thorne built an exit in 3 years. They wanted a photo shoot, an interview, the whole thing. I almost said no. But then I remembered Eleanor's advice. Own it. The interview was surreal. They asked about my background, my inspiration, my process. Not once did I mention my family. Not once did the interviewer ask about them, because why would they? This was my achievement. Mine alone. What's next for you? The reporter asked at the end. More, I said simply. I'm not done building. The magazine hit newsstands on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, my phone was ringing off the hook. Old classmates I hadn't heard from in years, former colleagues, random LinkedIn connections suddenly wanting to get coffee. I ignored most of them. But I couldn't ignore the call that came through that afternoon. My mother's number flashing on my screen for the first time in 3 years. 3 years of silence. No call after the wedding. No call on my first anniversary. No call when I'd posted about raising seed funding or about hiring my first employee or about literally anything else in my life. I declined the call. Immediately a text came through. Family emergency. Come home now. This is an order. I stared at those words. An order, not a request. Not an apology for missing the most important day of my life. An order like I was still a child who could be summoned at will. I showed Marcus the message. We were in our new apartment in San Francisco, a place with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, so different from the garage where this had all started. You don't have to go, he said immediately. I know, but I'm curious. After 3 years, what could possibly be so urgent? He studied my face. You sure you want to do this? We could just ignore it. Block the number. Move on. No, I said slowly. I think I need to see this through. I need to look them in the eye and understand exactly who they are. The drive to their house in the suburbs took 45 minutes. I'd bought a car after the acquisition, a Porsche Taycan in metallic gray. Not flashy, but unmistakably expensive. I'd spent half my life being sensible, being practical, making do with less. For once, I wanted something just because I wanted it. I pulled into their driveway behind my father's decade-old sedan and Caleb's BMW that was clearly a few payments away from repossession if the dents were any indication. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Shabbier. The garden was overgrown and paint was peeling from the window frames. I sat in my car for a full minute, breathing deeply, preparing myself. Marcus had wanted to come with me, but I'd told him no. This was something I needed to do alone. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, older than I, remembered her face tight with stress. She didn't hug me, didn't say hello, just stepped back to let me in. The whole family was assembled in the living room like a tribunal. My father in his armchair, my brother Caleb on the couch, his wife Jessica beside him looking artificially sympathetic. They'd clearly been waiting for me, probably for hours, getting more and more worked up. "Took you long enough," Caleb said, not bothering with greetings. I stayed standing. "You said there was an emergency." My father cleared his throat. "Sit down, Arya. This is a family matter." "I'm fine standing. What's the emergency?" My mother wrung her hands, playing the part of the worried matriarch. "Honey, we're so glad you're doing well. We saw the article about your sale." There it was. Not the article about my startup, not the article about my technology, the article about the money. "That's why you called. After 3 years of nothing, you read a magazine article about my company being acquired and suddenly there's a family emergency." Caleb stood up, his face flushing. "Don't be dramatic. We've been busy. You know how it is. Busy. Right. Busy celebrating Caleb's deal. On my wedding day." The room went very quiet. Jessica looked away. My mother's face crumpled into practiced hurt. "That's not fair," my mother said. "You know how important that deal was for your brother's career." "My wedding," I said slowly, "was not important for anything." My father waved his hand dismissively. "You got married anyway. You're fine. But now your brother needs help and family takes care of family." And there it was. The real reason. The emergency. "How much?" I asked flatly. Caleb had the grace to look uncomfortable for exactly 2 seconds. 5 million. Just a bridge loan until the company turns around. You won't even miss it with what you made. I felt something cold and clear settle over me. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was clarity. Perfect, absolute clarity. "Tell me about the company, Caleb. Your latest venture." He straightened up, sensing an opening. "It's revolutionary, Arya. Social media meets crypto meets influencer marketing. The next big thing." "And how much have you raised?" 20 million so far. From Mom and Dad put in their retirement savings. Jessica's parents contributed. We have a few angel investors. I turned to my parents. "You mortgaged the house again, didn't you?" My mother's silence was answer enough. I looked around the room. At my parents, who'd never once asked if I needed help when I was eating ramen for dinner while coding in a garage. At Caleb, who'd failed at 4 different startups and still expected everyone to bet on number 5. At Jessica, who'd married into this family of delusion and was in too deep to see the truth. "No," I said simply. Caleb's face went purple. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. I'm not giving you $5 million. I'm not giving you $5,000. I'm not giving you $5. My father stood up, his voice rising. "You ungrateful little." Ungrateful, the word came out like a whip. Ungrateful, you want to talk about gratitude. Where were you when I graduated top of my class? Where were you when I defended my thesis? Where the hell were you on my wedding day? We explained that my mother said, tears starting to flow. Real tears, probably. She'd always been good at crying on command. Caleb's deal was time-sensitive. And my wedding wasn't. My one wedding, the one day in my life when I needed my family and you chose him. You've always chosen him. Every single time. I pulled the document my father had pushed across the coffee table toward me. It was a loan guarantee form already filled out with my name, just waiting for my signature. "You didn't even call to ask. You just assumed I'd sign. That I'd do what I've always done, which is make myself smaller so Caleb can feel bigger." "That's not true," my mother protested weakly. "It's completely true. Every achievement I ever had was met with, 'That's nice, honey,' before you turned the conversation to Caleb. I worked 2 jobs through college. You never offered to help. Caleb flunked out of 3 schools and you kept paying. I built a company from nothing. You didn't even know about it until it was in Forbes. Caleb has failed at 4 businesses and you're still throwing money at him. Jessica finally spoke up, her voice sugary sweet. Arya family is supposed to support each other. You're rich now. It's just a small fraction of what you have. Why are you being so selfish? I laughed. Actually laughed. Selfish. You want to talk about obligation and family. Fine. Let's talk about the 3 empty chairs at my wedding. The ones marked family of the bride. The ones that were photographed and gossiped about by 90 guests. Let's talk about the text message I got during my first dance. Not congratulations. Not sorry, we missed it. Just an expectation that I'd understand why Caleb's business deal was more important than my marriage. The room was dead silent now. My obligation to this family ended the day you chose a business dinner over your daughter's wedding. You don't get to call me after 3 years and expect me to hand over millions of dollars. You don't call because you miss me. You don't call because you're proud of me. You call because you read a magazine and thought I might be useful. I picked up my purse. The answer is no. It will always be no. Not just to the money, but to all of this. I'm done being the forgotten daughter who's supposed to be understanding. I'm done being the backup plan. I'm done. Caleb lunged toward me. You selfish bitch. The door opened. Marcus walked in his presence, filling the room. I'd texted him on the drive over, asking him to come after all. He looked at Caleb's outstretched hand at my face and stepped smoothly between us. Don't touch my wife, he said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Marcus was 6'2" and had played rugby in college. Caleb was 5'9" and soft. The math was pretty simple. Caleb backed down immediately, but his face was twisted with rage. You're going to regret this. We're your family. No, I said, looking at each of them one last time. You're people I'm related to. There's a difference. My family is the man who stood beside me at a wedding you couldn't be bothered to attend. My family is the friend who held my hand through every rejection letter. My family is the mentor who believed in me when everyone else thought I was crazy. You're just people who share my DNA and expect that to be enough. I walked out. Marcus followed. We got into my car and I drove away from that house and I didn't look back. Not once. The next morning, I was in Eleanor's office again. I'd barely slept, running on adrenaline and a strange sense of lightness, like I'd put down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten I was holding it. I need your advice on something, I said. Eleanor looked up from her laptop. Hit me. I want to start a foundation. A fund for women in tech who come from backgrounds like mine. No family support, no trust fund, no Stanford pedigree. I want to give grants and mentorship to the kind of person VCs usually ignore. She smiled slowly. How much are you thinking? $20 million to start. The Thorn Legacy Fund. That's a substantial commitment. It's important. Eleanor, you changed my life. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. I want to do that for other people, and I want my family to watch me do it. She understood immediately. This isn't just philanthropy. No, it's a statement. They wanted to talk about legacy, about family. Fine, I'll show them what a real legacy looks like. Not a failed crypto scheme, not another startup that folds in 18 months. Real lasting impact. We spent the next 3 weeks building the framework. Eleanor helped me structure it properly, brought in lawyers and accountants. We set criteria: women from low-income backgrounds, first-generation college students, minorities in tech, anyone who'd faced systematic disadvantage, grants ranging from $50,000 to $500,000, mentorship programs, networking events, everything I'd wished I'd had. The press conference was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I'd hired a PR firm to handle the announcement, and they'd done their job well. Every major tech publication was represented. Business channels had cameras set up. It was bigger than I'd anticipated. I wore a sharp navy suit and stood at the podium in a hotel conference room looking out at the sea of reporters. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Thorn Legacy Fund, a $20 million initiative to support women in technology who've been overlooked by traditional funding sources. I explained the structure, the criteria, the vision. I talked about systemic barriers and unconscious bias, and the talent being wasted because it didn't come in the right package. I didn't mention my family. I didn't have to. The message was clear enough. The questions started immediately. One reporter asked Miss Thorne what inspired this particular focus. Personal experience, I said simply. I know what it's like to be underestimated, to work twice as hard for half the recognition, to be told you're not enough. This fund is for everyone who's been told that and who refused to believe it. The press conference was still going when my phone started buzzing with notifications. I ignored them, staying focused on the reporters answering questions about application processes and selection criteria. It wasn't until I was back in my car that I checked. The top news story on every tech site: Aria Thorne launches $20M fund for underrepresented women in tech. Scrolling down, I saw the other story breaking at the same time. Caleb Vance's crypto social fails to meet funding goals, files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I hadn't known the timing would align like that. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. By evening, the juxtaposition was everywhere. Split-screen images on business news channels. Aria Thorne giving a confident speech about empowering the next generation of female leaders. Caleb Vance being led into a federal building, federal investigators looking into his company's books for possible securities fraud. My mother called 17 times that day. I didn't answer. My father sent emails, deleted without reading. Jessica sent a long, rambling message about how I was destroying the family. I blocked her number. Only Caleb himself was silent. He was too busy with lawyers. 3 days later, my parents showed up at my office. Actually showed up in the marble lobby of the building where I now worked as Synapse's chief innovation officer. Security called up to warn me. There are 2 people claiming to be your parents in the lobby. They say it's urgent. Should I send them up? I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office and looked down. From 23 floors up, I could see them. My mother in a coat that was too thin for the San Francisco chill. My father looking smaller than I remembered, defeated. They were arguing with the security guard, my mother gesturing wildly. I watched them for a long moment. Then I picked up the phone to security. No. Please escort them out. If they return, call the police for trespassing. Are you sure, ma'am? They seem quite insistent. I'm completely sure. Thank you. I watched from my window as security led them out. My mother was crying dramatic and loud. My father was shouting something I couldn't hear. Other people in the lobby were staring. They made a scene. A public, embarrassing scene. I felt nothing. Or maybe I felt something like relief, like watching a chapter close that should have ended years ago. Marcus took me out to dinner that night. A small Italian place we loved, nothing fancy, just good food and quiet conversation. How are you doing? He asked, reaching across the table to take my hand. Honestly, I feel lighter, like I've been holding my breath for 30 years and I can finally exhale. No regrets. I thought about it, really thought about it. None. Marcus, they've been making me feel like I wasn't enough my entire life, like I was the consolation prize, the acceptable daughter who would never be as important as the golden son. And you know what the twisted part is? I kept trying to prove them wrong. Every achievement was partly about showing them I mattered. Even building Insight AI, as much as it was for me, part of me was hoping they'd finally notice, finally be proud. And now I don't need them to notice. I don't need their approval. I built something incredible and I did it without them. Better yet, I did it in spite of them. And that $20 million I just committed to the fund, that's 20 million ways of saying that I'm not just building a company or making money. I'm changing lives. That's a legacy. That's impact. That's something they'll never be able to take credit for. The headlines kept coming over the next weeks. The contrast between my rising trajectory and Caleb's spectacular fall was too juicy for the media to resist. From garage to glory, Aria Thorne's remarkable journey ran in TechCrunch. The fall of Silicon Valley's most entitled founder was in Wired with a photo of Caleb that made him look exactly like what he was, a man-child who'd never been told no. The investigation into his company revealed what I'd suspected all along: inflated user numbers, fictional partnerships, money being moved between accounts to create the illusion of traction. He'd been running a house of cards and my parents had bet their retirement on it. Part of me waited to feel guilty. Wasn't I supposed to feel bad that my parents had lost everything, that my brother might go to jail? Wasn't I supposed to want to help despite everything? But I didn't. I felt calm, clear, sure. Eleanor and I had coffee one morning about 6 weeks after everything had imploded. We were at our usual spot, a cafe in Palo Alto, where we'd spent so many hours plotting and planning. You know what I admire most about you, she said, stirring her latte. You didn't get vindictive. You didn't leak information about Caleb. You didn't go to the press about your family. You just moved forward with your own life and let them deal with the consequences of their own choices. It wasn't about revenge, I said. That's the thing people don't understand. I didn't ruin Caleb's company. He did that himself. I didn't force my parents to invest their retirement savings in an obvious scam. They chose to believe in him despite all evidence to the contrary. I just refused to bail them out. That's not revenge. That's boundaries. Still, a lot of people would have caved. Family pressure is intense. Family pressure only works if you still want their approval. Once I realized I didn't need it, didn't even want it anymore, they had no power over me. She raised her cup. To boundaries then. And to building the life you actually want. The Thorn Legacy Fund started accepting applications that fall. We were flooded. Hundreds of applications from brilliant women with incredible ideas and no path forward. Reading their stories was like reading my own story over and over. The rejection letters, the condescension, the doors that wouldn't open. I personally reviewed every application. It took hours every evening, but I needed to do it. I needed to see these women really see them the way I'd needed someone to see me. We funded our first cohort in January, 8 women, with ideas ranging from biotech to education technology. I met with each of them personally, and I told them the same thing Eleanor had told me. You're not here because we're being charitable. You're here because you're brilliant. Don't make yourself smaller. Don't apologize for taking up space. Build something amazing, and when people try to tell you that you can't, remember that I'm betting a significant amount of money that you absolutely can. The award ceremony was in March at a hotel in downtown San Francisco. Press coverage, speeches, networking, the women's families came proud and supportive. I watched them taking pictures, beaming with pride, and felt a small ache for what I'd never had. But I also felt grateful. Grateful for Marcus sitting in the front row watching me with unmistakable pride. Grateful for Eleanor, who'd introduced me at the ceremony with words that made me cry. Grateful for Claire, who'd flown in from New York just to be there. Grateful for the family I'd chosen, the people who'd shown up when it mattered. After the ceremony, a journalist approached me. "Miss Thorne, your family's absence is noticeable. Any comment on your relationship with them?" I smiled politely. Family isn't about biology. It's about who shows up for you, who believes in you, who helps you become the person you're meant to be. By that definition, I have an incredible family, and many of them are in this room tonight. That quote made it into 3 different articles. My mother sent a long email about how I'd humiliated them publicly. I didn't respond. What was there to say? In May, I received the Tech Leader of the Year award at a major industry conference. Standing on that stage, looking out at thousands of people, I thought about the girl who'd walked down the aisle past 3 empty chairs. I thought about the woman who'd worked in a garage collecting rejection letters. I thought about every moment I'd been told directly or indirectly that I wasn't enough. My acceptance speech was short. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to every person who's been underestimated, overlooked, or told they don't belong. It belongs to every woman who's had to work twice as hard to be seen as half as good. And it belongs to everyone who's had to choose between their dreams and someone else's expectations. Thank you for this honor, and thank you for believing that people like me deserve a seat at the table. The standing ovation lasted for 2 full minutes. Marcus was crying in the front row. Eleanor was grinning like a proud parent. This was my family. These were my people. After the ceremony, there was a gala dinner. I was seated at a table with other award winners, industry leaders, people whose names I'd only read in articles. They treated me like a peer, like I belonged. Because I did. Marcus and I left early, exhausted but happy. We walked along the Embarcadero, the lights of the city reflecting off the bay. It was one of those perfect San Francisco nights when the wind dies down and the city feels magical. "You did it," Marcus said, pulling me close. "Everything you set out to do." "We did it," I corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to." We were quiet for a moment, just walking, enjoying the night. Then my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. Another message from my mother. "Your father had a stroke. He's in the hospital. Please, Arya, please come." I stared at the message for a long time. Marcus read it over my shoulder. "What do you want to do?" he asked carefully. I thought about my father, the man who'd never once told me he was proud of me, who'd waved away my wedding like it was an inconvenience, who'd expected me to hand over millions of dollars to bail out my brother without even asking if I could afford it, without even considering what I might need that money for. I thought about the stroke, the hospital, the plea in my mother's message, and I realized something profound. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel satisfaction at their suffering. I felt nothing. They'd become strangers to me. People I used to know. People who'd mattered once in another life. I don't want to do anything, I said finally. Is that terrible? No, Marcus said immediately. It's human. Arya, you tried for years to get their attention, their approval, their love. They had countless chances to show you that you mattered to them. They chose not to take those chances. You don't owe them anything now. What if he dies? Then he dies. And you'll mourn the father you wished you'd had, not the one you actually did. But you don't have to rush to a hospital bedside to prove you're a good person. You're an amazing person. You've built something beautiful out of the pain they caused you. That's enough. I looked at the message one more time. Then, without typing a response, I handed my phone to Marcus. He understood immediately. He powered it off and slipped it into his pocket. We kept walking. The ocean stretched out before us, vast and endless. The salt air filled my lungs. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly free. I thought about the girl in the wedding dress walking past those empty chairs. She'd been so hurt, so broken, so desperate to understand why she wasn't enough. If I could talk to her now, I'd tell her that she was always enough, that the problem was never her, that she was about to build something so much bigger and more meaningful than family approval could ever be. I'd tell her that the empty chairs were a gift, even though they didn't feel like one. They were the final proof she needed that she had to stop waiting for people who would never show up. They were permission to build her own life, on her own terms, with people who actually valued her. I'd tell her that 3 years from now she'd walk on a beach with a man who truly loved her and she'd get a message about her father's stroke and she'd feel nothing. And that feeling, nothing wouldn't make her a bad person. It would make her free. Family is supposed to lift you up. It's supposed to be your foundation, your safety net, your biggest cheerleaders. But what do you do when your family is none of those things? When they actively hold you back, tear you down, make you feel small? You build a new family. You find your people. You create the support system you deserve, and you let go of the guilt that tells you that blood alone should be enough to earn your loyalty. I learned that boundaries aren't cruel. They're necessary. I learned that you can't save people who don't want to be saved, and trying will only drown you both. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Most importantly, I learned that my worth isn't determined by whether my family recognizes it. It's inherent. I am enough all by myself. The accolades are nice. The money is nice. But they're not what make me valuable. I was valuable when I was coding in a garage. I was valuable when I was walking past empty chairs. I've always been valuable. It just took me a while to see it. So here's what I want to know from you. Have you ever had to choose between your peace and your family's expectations? Have you ever had to walk away from people you loved because staying was destroying you? How did you find the courage to do it? Drop your story in the comments. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about choosing yourself. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to shrink yourself anymore. Sometimes you have to let go of the family you were born into to make room for the family you deserve.